All right, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by another live episode of Real Estate Titans. I'm your host, Greg Fowler, traveling throughout the marketplace, interviewing the top real estate professionals on our field, essentially gathering insight, inspiration, really drives and motivates these top producers above and beyond everybody else in what I'd like to consider a real estate titan. Our very special guest and feature titan for today, I'm super excited, Shane Torres. Shane, thanks so much for taking the time. It's an honor.
No, thanks for having me on. This is an honor. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And so Iowa, huh? That's where you're at right now. So
yeah,
that's awesome. And I love it because, again, this technology allows so many people and so many professionals just to get together and absorb some of the genius that's going to be coming from you, Shane. So I just can't wait to jump in.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. So let's just start with telling everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh man. Okay. So a little bit about myself. Well, I married 3 kids, live in Polk City, Iowa, suburb outside of Des Moines, which is the capital. Been in real estate 10 years now, and it's been fun.
Wow. Okay. So going into it and bringing all that up, Shane, I think it's, you've accomplished so many amazing things in your career and all the way through and through. So I want to pull a little bit of that out of you. When it comes down to it. So from the very beginning, why real estate? What got you into it? What was it? And to where you're at today?
Market crash in 2009 got me into it. I was a home builder and got a little overzealous, and the market hit or the crash hit, and I had no choice but to actually, you know what? I say at the time I felt I had no choice.
Okay.
But so I shut down the home building company, and after a few months of what I would call depression, I had nothing else to do. So I had actually started my real estate license class, and I had one final test to take. So I borrowed some money from my father-in-law because I didn't have any.
Sure.
And took the final test and, got started with it. I'd applied for like over 200 and some jobs, got turned down numerous times. I was going through bankruptcy and foreclosure, and I just had, like I said, I had time and I had nothing else to do. So,
and what better thing than to jump into real estate?
Right.
And obviously, you haven't looked back since, Shane. So through your career and progression today, what was that like?
At first, like anybody, it was tough. I was still working construction part-time.
Okay.
For that first year, my first year I did about 13,000 in GCI, I think.
Okay.
But then, what started to happen was, I showed a few properties here and there, and, I was showing some REOs. So I reached out to the prior owner at that time and asked how, I was like, I think I can do this. How do you get into this? So he sent me this list and said, here, just get on all these lists. And I did. But what I realized is right away is you have to know somebody to get into REO. But what it also did was got me set up for like BPOs. Back then I'm like, well, what's a BPO? So I started getting these requests. And then, the very, very first one I ever did, the company called and said, we got this BPO over and, a neighboring town. You go over there. It was like an hour and a half away in the middle of a sleet storm. Wow. But I knew to get in, I had to do it. So I did. And after a while, I started getting more and more from different companies. And then one company in particular called and said, hey, we just got the account for Freddie Mac for the state of Iowa. How many can you handle? And I said, as many as you can send. So long story short, that first full year, I did 1,000 BPOs.
Wow.
On top of doing about 50 in GCI. So altogether, I did 100,000 that year between BPOs and GCI. And that helped get me back to where I was going or where I needed to be in being able to start paying bills again, if you will.
Yeah.
But then around that same time, there was a class they brought to the Des Moines area, the National Association of Realtors, called SFR, which is short sale and foreclosure resource. So I went and took it. And as I'm sitting here, and there's the national coach speaker, Leroy Hauser, and he's like starts to explain how the banks are going to start telling you how much they will take and pre-approved or, pre-approved short sales. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is genius. I should focus on this. So I did. And I did some more training. After a while, I built some systems. And before you knew it, they started coming in, and I was processing anywhere from 50 to 60 at a time by myself. Wow. And at one point controlled about 25% of the short sale market in the local area. So that was basically the base of what this is all built on was those short sales. So
okay, and obviously a lot of change and things, and adapting to what was going on in the market. So from that point, obviously, to now managing broker, and tell everybody a little bit about that transition.
Yeah. So at the same time as I started to get a little bit more money, I would start to market in my local community, do some mailers here and there. I got heavily involved in the local chamber. I was on the board. I was president for a few years. My kids got older, so I was being seen more. I was sponsoring their sports teams. And then it was just a natural progression, so that it took about 18 months. But after that, we were involved in over 90% of traditional transactions, whether one side or the other, for quite a while. And then as I continued to grow business wise, I realized that I only have so much time in a day. So then I started looking at how do I leverage my time, assistants, systems, things like that, which is then when I got into opening my first office in that first 2012. And it started out as a team office. But then after a while, I determined that I wanted to help other people. So then I turned it into a full office. And then from there, it's progressed on to where we are now. And eventually myself and my three partners buying out the prior owner. It was November 1st, 2016.
And 2016, again, there's some time frame into that, and you guys have had some amazing records and things along those lines. With what you do as far as volume and production, things like that. So there's a lot of information and thought process into it, Shane. So when it comes down to your next step or evolution into it, because you've been in the business, you have a great track record, a beautiful reputation. Talking about the consulting, national speaking, and then obviously bringing up, road to 20 million. So I'd like to share that a little bit with the audience too.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't know exactly when in 2012, but after a while, I got to the point with the real estate and the real estate team where I was like, well, I feel like I need to do something more. What's next? So I decided not one person can handle everything. So why not teach everyone around me to be the best within our company? So that's when I looked into becoming a broker and, turn it into a full office. So while this is happening and all these things, as we continue to grow, we go from 20 million to 30 million to 40 million as a team, I started to get approached by people outside the market saying, how'd you do it? Would you coach us? Would you, mentor me? And for the longest time, I said no. And so then after traveling to different places and going to different conferences and meeting different people, I started to think, why not?
Sure.
So, and that's where that was like probably 3 years ago.
Wow.
And then, I had the bright idea that, well, if people are going to hire me to do these things, I need the credibility. So I'm like, I need to write a book. They need to know that I'm legit.
Well said.
So I tried to write it myself. That was a horrible idea because I started to type this stuff out myself and I was just rambling and I had to, I started over like 3 times before I actually had my consultants help me get to where it's at. And finally get it published. So I started over 3 times. I am not great at grammar and spelling, and my staff always gets on me because I randomly capitalize things that don't need capitalized. I don't know why, but I do.
Hey, Shane, you get it done. That's the important thing.
Well, that's why I just told someone that just last week. They're like, your email that you sent out at 3:30 this morning had some typos and grammar errors, and I said, honestly, at 3:00 in the morning, I just want to get the message out. That's all. That's all I care about. So I got my point across.
Well said. Okay, so we'll go into the book real quick. So what is the name of the book? Where can everybody get it? That sort of thing.
Yep. So the book is Road to 20 Million, and it's on Amazon, all platforms, audio, paper, and paper, the digital.
Love it.
Kindle version. I mean, sorry.
Okay.
So the concept of the book is very much like the course too. Is like, again, how did I get to that first 20 million in production in those first 3 years? So the first half of the book is a how-to to avoid the mistakes that I made. So it basically starts the day that I shut down my home building company and all the stuff that I went through, the personal challenges, the Chapter 7, the lawsuits, all of that. And then the second part is the how I did it.
Love it.
And then which I then turned into a 7-step course.
Okay.
Called the Roadmap.
And that is, kind of dovetailing into road to 20million.com, right?
Yep.
I mean, so everybody can kind of consume that information and, learn more, obviously sign up for the course. Now, is it like a one-on-one mentorship sort of scenario?
There are different levels. So the roadmap can just be downloaded and they can just follow, the steps as they want. There are different levels. As far as just, there's group options. There is one-on-one options. I do limit that to 5 people just because of the time that it would take.
Understood.
But yeah, there's different levels. But if someone just wanted to download the roadmap and that's it and kind of do it at their own pace and reach out after the fact, they can do that.
Okay. Love it. So obviously, road to 20million.com and then the Facebook page as well and the Instagram account. So everybody can kind of connect with you that way and find more information on that too.
On that stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So this is really, really great information and we're just getting warmed up, everybody. So Shane, I want to switch gears real quick on this one, just to dive in a little bit deeper to you as a person. And this is actually one of my favorite questions. It's what's your why? I mean, what motivates you? What drives you? Gets you excited every day out of bed to do what you do to the level you do it at?
Yep. So this is probably a common answer for most, but my family is the first one. When I was a home builder, my priorities were way jacked up. My philosophy was all about the money. I was never around. I was always gone. One pivotal moment in this journey was probably a month or so after I shut down my home building company. I was at the park with my kids, and my daughter was 5 and my son was 3. And I had the realization that I'd never taken them to the park before.
Wow.
Which is messed up.
Yeah.
So what all this did, as far as, am I proud of what happened? No, but I'm not ashamed by it either because it led me to where I am now and I've grown from it. But it helped me get my priorities in line. So my family is first and foremost in all areas. So that's that. And then the next thing is just helping people. So I've learned a lot of lessons in the last 10 years, or even beyond that, but just really in the 10 years since I lost my home building company.
Right.
And so if I could sum up into what gets me up now and my why is I have what I would call a mission to help everybody obtain that pivotal life balance. And by that, it doesn't mean, everybody's equal in time balance. You got to give and take, but to have a good revenue and a life to enjoy it. Those are my 2.
I love that. And I think that having that, the overall balance in thought process, talking about your family and then helping others, something that's above and beyond us, I think is the strongest levels of why. But, so many of us struggle to try to find what does that mean for us? What is our balance? And I think that when people look at it, if they're very focused on one side, they're losing something huge on another, whether it's health, spirituality, relationships on one side and, financial gain on the other. you have to try to find your middle, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And I agree with that 100%. So, you mentioned spiritual. So one of the things I am strong in my faith,
Sure.
but one of the things that I've tried to do more this year that I felt that I needed to help balance that out is I've actually gotten more involved into my church and doing more
Love
and
it.
helping more. My wife's always been heavily involved with it. And I help, but not to the
Sure.
level that I would say that I probably needed to. So I've started to do that more,
Hmm.
and it honestly feels good, to be able to help out in that regard. And like I said, whether it be health, family, spirituality, and then finances. I think
Hmm.
they're all correlated. Like you
Yes.
said, if you focus too much on one instead of the other, you're lacking somewhere. So it's finding a good amount of each.
Agreed. And I think that's beautiful. And again, why you've had the success that you've had, Shane, is because you're focusing on these things. Not everybody is, and it might seem common, but it's really not. So
Yeah.
I think that's great advice through and through all the way. But so when it comes down to the note of advice,
Mhm.
which this is a crowd pleaser for this particular series, and everybody really wants to know what the Titans are doing or have done to grow, to
Mhm.
scale their business. And obviously, you'd have a huge laundry list of things for people to grow and scale and do and add to their business. But Shane, if you could look back at your career thus far and pick or choose one or two things that you added to your business that took it from one level to the next,
Yep.
what's that look like for you?
Uh, I'd say the two primary are the first, be intentional about your calendar and time blocking,
Love it.
which then correlates to priorities, because the way I explain it and coach in what I do is
Hmm.
I have three categories on my time blocking.
Okay.
Family and friends, personal time comes first, whether it's church, gym, going out with my wife, being with my kids at their games, whatever
Right.
that might be. That's first.
Hmm.
The second thing is the business building things, the calling, the whatever it might, it's different for everybody. It could be
Sure.
Facebook messages, and then filling in with appointments.
Hmm.
So that would be the first thing.
Okay.
And the second thing would be to systemize all of that, whether it
Brilliant.
be with assistants or systems, technologies nowadays. You
Yeah.
can do a lot of things, just plug and play. We have a combination of both,
Hmm.
but the assistants give us time. So what I do at this point in time is I manage systems that manage the people. So
It's beautiful.
those would be my two things: is systemization and time blocking.
Okay, and brilliant adds into it and huge takeaways. I want to dig a little deeper into that for everybody out there who's
Yep.
watching or listening. And this might be a silly question, Shane. You might get asked this quite a bit, but when you're at that point,
Mm-hmm.
when do you know that it's the right time to leverage someone else's knowledge or time or add an assistant, whether it's physical or virtual? When is the right time? Is that a silly question?
It's not a silly question, and so for me, it was because I made a mistake,
Okay.
and by that I meant I forgot to follow up with a lead or forgot to make a phone call, something like that, and so I knew I needed to add someone because I was out of time.
Hmm.
Same thing with that person; they made a mistake. I'd add someone else. Now, knowing what I know now,
Mhm.
I feel what I've tell people is if you reach that 8.5 to 9 million in production, you need help.
Okay.
You don't need start a team. You need someone to help answer your calls, help do your paperwork, help do
Mm.
those things where you're out showing business. Otherwise, you can't ever get away. You can't go on a trip. You can't do anything. So
Mm.
that would be the number that I tell people now. But again, for me, it was making a mistake.
Okay. And I love that advice all the way through. I mean, everybody's going to kind of feel that right time frame for them, but I like having those numbers that are in line. And I think that that's a great a baseline for everybody to kind of look at and go
Yep.
through. But everybody knows, I mean, it is based off of pain points when it comes
Yep.
down to it's like, gosh, I feel like I'm spread too thin or I'm not doing as much as I should be over here. The gaps will end up showing and you got to fill them somehow. So
Right.
I think that's brilliant advice all the way through and through, Shane. So I want to shift gears on this, and this is the tricky part of this interview and series. It ends up being the challenge question. Now,
Okay.
I always lead into it this way with the Titans as we all have struggle. We all have challenge, whether it's personal or professional hardship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not downplaying that whatsoever, but I'm a firm believer that it's not so much what happens, but what we learn and grow from.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what we can also share with others too.
Yeah.
So Shane, if you're comfortable sharing a personal or professional
Yeah.
challenge, what's that look like for you?
Are we talking now or just in general?
Anytime, anytime.
For me, the first few years and 2 years and even a few years after that,
Mm-hmm.
that is again that time, that balance. I struggled with it just like everybody else.
Right.
And I remember having a conversation with my wife once,
Mm-hmm.
and we were having a disagreement, and I'd said, I don't understand what the problem is. I'm at all the kid events. I'm always there. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, what about me? That was,
Ouch.
that was, that was just
Yeah.
a punch in the gut. And
Mm-hmm.
what it let me know, that's when I knew I needed to do something different. That's when I
Okay.
knew I needed to get help. I need to leverage my time more. And, that's what I did. Am I
Okay.
perfect on it? No, I still, I do a lot better now, but for the
Right.
next few years, I still nonstop. It's hard to turn it off.
Right. Right.
So that led to challenges at home
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, because I was not practicing at that time what I was preaching.
Ah, that's tough. And I know that there's so many people who are watching or listening to this, myself included, where we dive so deep into what we're doing and trying to make a difference with so many people and trying to make a positive impact into this world that sometimes we get pulled away from, I don't want to say what really matters, but something that should be very high on everybody's priority is your family.
Right.
Your wife, your children, your parents, siblings, close relationships like that. So the fact of the matter is that Shane, I think everybody and anybody who's doing any level of production or really pushing themselves out of their comfort zone has had these conversations. But my takeaway through that, and again, just further reflection on me, hopefully everybody's feeling this too, is you need to just constantly remind yourself like, hey, they're saying something for a reason. You can fix it, right? Just try to shift some time around. I mean, that's what you've done and keep going forward, right?
Well, and I mean, the thing is around that, as at that time around the same time I went to speak to my daughter's 7th grade class
Okay.
about what I do.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, they get asked questions. My daughter literally grilled me for 5 minutes why I'm on my phone so much.
Wow.
And at my son, I try to talk to him and he shushes me and says, I'm on the phone, I'm working. He was emulating me. These are all happening around the same time.
Wow,
So
Shane.
What I found at the time and what I know now is there's always going to be opportunity to make more money.
Right.
My daughter, I've never missed a dance that she's done, when she was younger.
Sure.
I've never missed those things, but if I did, they would remember that. They wouldn't remember how much money we made or how much production we did. It'd be that I was gone.
Wow.
And I didn't want that. So I try to practice that on a daily basis now. And other than being out of town on business or something like that, I don't miss events.
Wow, Shane, I love that. And that's gonna hit the heartstrings of so many people watching or listening to this, because that's so true. And again, you can do it. There's no excuse. Everybody's busy. Everybody has the same amount of time throughout the day. If this man here can figure it out and work on it, so can everybody else who's watching or listening, period.
Yeah, it's a prime example, and then we can move on for this.
Sure.
Is probably, let's see, he's 5 years ago. I had someone call and say they wanted to see a property. And I told them I had an appointment because they didn't even know what it was. Just I needed to have an appointment.
Sure.
And they're like, can someone on your team do it? Called everybody. They weren't available. Guy got mad. It's like, fine, I'll call someone else. And he did. And they bought it. Okay. So I had someone ask me, are you mad that you missed out on that? My response was, I didn't miss out. I invested it into my time. What nobody knew is the appointment I had was my son's 4-year-old concert. He only had one 4-year-old concert that he would never have again. So I was not going to miss that. And then that's been my thing ever since. I won't let people dictate my time.
I think that's brilliant. And going back to what you were going through during the advisory portion, that time blocking and really breaking that down. I always talk to everybody and the top and producers across the board. They treat those family events as appointments that are not broken.
Yep.
You think of that as the biggest listing appointment you've ever had in your life times 2. And that's what that family appointment is. And not just your health, right? So if you go to the gym or things like that, or if it's a spiritual time or just meditation time, or those appointments, you shouldn't break them. I mean, because you start breaking one, then it starts slipping. And I'm a firm believer that how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Exactly.
And I just think that's a beautiful message that you shared there, Shane. So thank you so much for doing it. It's not easy to air your stuff out in front of everybody, but
hey, I wrote a book about it. So literally I'm an open book.
It's out there, everybody. It's out there on Amazon. So let's go into the next question. Let's go to a softer part of this. And this is actually my favorite question throughout the series. It's the travel back in time question. So if you could go back in time, Shane, and give your younger self a piece of advice or two, and now this is any age range, this is any time frame. It could be personal, professional, it could be funny. What would you say to young Shane?
That's I don't know. That's actually a good question. You know, sometimes I think that you know, I almost got my real estate license when I was 22, but my boss at the time talked me out of it. His family owned a brokerage, and he basically scared the crap out of me. And so, you know, I sometimes think, well, maybe I should have gotten into it sooner. So maybe I would tell myself to go ahead and take that leap. But then I don't think I would have learned everything that I've done what I've done to this point.
Sure.
I think I would have taken a lot of things for granted, because that was back when all you had to do is put a sign in the yard and things would sell. You know, I got it in 2009 when everything was going downhill and everyone was getting out of business.
Right.
So, you know, it could be in regards to that, or when I did have my home building and framing company, you know, when I first set out, I always said I was going to be conservative. I was going to do one or two things at a time, and I was going to be smart about it. I was not. The first few, the first few I did were great. So I started doing more and more. Money was flowing from banks, and we were young. We didn't save. So, you know, save money, not buy. One of the dumbest things I ever did was walk into a local Ford dealer and order $100,000 of brand new trucks. And I wrecked mine 4 months later.
Wow, Shane.
So, yes, I don't know. I don't know that I would change anything, because I led me to where I am now, but I would say it would be one of those two things.
Okay. Well, but I love that question in particular and your answers to it, because we don't have a time machine. We can't go back and change anything. And I agree with what you're saying. Everything we went through, positive or negative in our lives, and the decision we made led us to where we are and who we are and what we've done so far. But why I like that question is anybody who's watching or listening to this, myself included, you can look at it and say, hey, if I decide to be more conservative through this decision and I start making a lot of money, don't go blow it. Save it, right? So that's a takeaway. And anybody can use that going through it. And then, hey, maybe I should have gotten my license earlier. Well, you're right about your time frame in your 20s, and it probably wouldn't have been the best decision for you at that time. But if someone's out there watching or listening to this, it's like, you know, maybe now is the right time for you. And do you want to be the person who says, you know what, I wish I did that 10 years ago? So I love that question.
You know, I did just think of what I would say.
Oh, here we go. This is great.
I would tell myself to spend more time with my grandparents. I had many opportunities to spend with my grandparents. I chose not to, because whether it be for parties or football or whatever. And before I could, it was too late.
Oh, gosh.
So that's what I would do.
And, you know, Shane, saying that is so beautiful to me, because going back to our, you know, prior thought process of this conversation, the family and the relationships and everybody who's close to us, the most important thing, like you said, money will come, you know, it'll come back. You can't get that time back from others, and especially those very close relationships as far as family.
Right.
So for me, the takeaways are very specific to everybody out there, with what we already said, but that family, spend time with your family, listen to what Shane's saying, right? So if he could go back and say, spend more time with your grandparents, spend time with your siblings, spend time with your parents, spend time with your grandparents, your kids, the people you love, you're never going to get that back. So yeah, no, that's a beautiful ad, Shane, all the way through and through. And not just for everybody out there, myself included. I think that's great stuff. I want to move on to one of the crowd pleasers for this particular show and series, Shane. We're almost getting there. Is the feeding of the mind question. So so many professionals and producers, whether they're young, old, male, female, new season, into this business, they want to learn from the Titans and how they're feeding their minds, how they're really growing intellectually that way in so many different ways. So I always lead into it with books you're reading or have read that have influenced you, podcasts you're listening to, influencers or coaches on social media. How are you feeding your mind?
Yep. So, all the above.
Okay.
I've got books that I just finished one this morning. It's actually Shut Up and Listen by Tillman. I'm going to say this wrong, but Fertitta.
Oh yeah, I think that's right.
You know who that is?
Yeah, we'll put it in the comments down below.
So
we'll
he's owns like 400 and some restaurants, owns the Houston Rockets, like Golden Nugget. I mean, just crazy success stories. So that was a good one. I like Ryan Blair's Rock Bottom to Rock Star.
Okay.
Anything Grant Cardone, Gary Vaynerchuk. Book wise. So there's just a lot of different ones that I listen to. I will go on record and say that I do all ebooks. When I try to read, I fall asleep. So, and I take forever and it's hard for me to retain unless I listen to it. I do listen to a Bible verse usually every morning.
Okay.
Podcast, GSD Mode, Joshua Smith.
Oh yeah. Great one.
Obviously yours, Grant Cardone, Gary Vaynerchuk. I like Joe Rogan's. I listen to his quite a bit.
For sure.
Valuetainment. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I'm not.
That's a really good one. He's different. A successful insurance business owner, but he interviews like athletes and mafia people and business owners and but then a lot of who I've surrounded myself with at this point started with watching Joshua Smith's podcast. Okay. But then John Cheplack and following John Cheplack. Wow, and so, I actually personally coached with John for a while. And he's just saw him here recently. He spoke to the Remax broker owner in Hawaii last month. So anybody who I've connected with around him, they're all uplifting and motivating. So.
Okay. And I love that huge list. And the fact that you mentioned, Shane, which is, I think is beautiful, is the way that you're consuming the information. There's not one right or wrong way to do it, whether you're watching videos, you're listening to audiobooks or podcasts, or you're physically reading it. However you can get that material in, but just constantly learning and growing. I do want to mention your podcast. So for all the viewers and listeners out there, so you're starting your podcast. Tell everybody a little bit about that and kind of go from there.
Yep. So it's very similar to what we're doing here. I just interview people. I wanted to start with my 3 partners in my real estate brokerage because they all have excellent stories. Most recently, I had on one of my partners who actually was born in a refugee camp. Wow. And his parents came to Iowa to escape their country because of, war, and his dad, they were targeting prominent leaders, and his dad was a leader. And so essentially from refugee camp to successful business owner. Unreal. So he's who I talk to. We have so many stories like that just within our company alone. So that's where I was starting with that. But again, talking with influencers and people who have done big things in their world. So
love it. Huge. And I think that, I'm a little bit biased towards that setup, but I think it's so wonderful when we can share other stories and insight and inspiration. I mean, so I think it's great.
Well, people, they have to know that we're real and we have backgrounds. We all come from places of starting. We've all had struggles, with mine and my chapter 7, and we all have issues, if you will.
Everybody.
And so I think it's helpful for people to know that they can succeed and get past it.
Wow. Yeah. I think it's great. So name of the podcast, where you want everybody to go listen to it.
Road to 20 million.
Love it. Perfect. iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts?
Yeah, it's all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on all of them.
Awesome. Love it. So everybody subscribe to that. Stay tuned into more beautiful information from Shane. Shane, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and doing this. I know you're a super busy guy.
No, it's been awesome.
I want to wrap everything up with a final question.
Yep.
This ends up being a quote or mantra that you live by that sums you up as a man, as a professional. What's that look like for you?
Oh man, that's a tough one. There's so many, and I just got asked this here recently too, and I had to quote my wife because I couldn't remember what I wanted to say.
Okay.
And that one I said, "Don't stoop to stupid."
That's a great one.
That's what my wife told my kids once.
I love it.
So, that's a tough one. Mantra, man. I don't know. I haven't really thought about something that could sum up me in a quote. You know what? I tell everyone always I'm a wealth of what not to do. So,
okay. Yeah.
If you want to avoid mistakes, I can tell you how to do that because I've made quite a few.
I love that though, Shane. I mean, it's so honest and genuine and truthful to who you are as a man, and learning and growing, and just with a beautiful reputation in the community. And I think that's fantastic. If you have anything else, Shane, let me know. I'll put it down in the comments below. But that's beautiful. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
No, I love it all the way through and through. But Shane, I can't thank you enough again. You are an official real estate titan, my friend. So
thanks for having me. I appreciate
and everybody out there, thank you so much as always for your time and attention, your love and support. If you like what we're doing here at the Real Estate Titans, please don't forget to like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and have a listen on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast. Live every Tuesday and Friday afternoon, a different Titan, a different location. We'll catch everybody on the next live episode of Real Estate Titans. Take care.